from the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide. In Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
Caroline Hyde in New York, in for Emily Chang, who's somewhere in Texas looking at the space race, and this is Bloomberg Technology. And coming up in the next hour, we're heading straight to her in Van Horn, Texas, where Emily is standing by at Blue Origin launch site. We'll find out what to expect when Amazon founder Jeff Bezos heads to space. Plus, Robinhood sets its sights on a $35 billion valuation in its IPO. It could be the fifth biggest on a U.S. exchange in this record-setting year for public offerings. And Global Foundries is looking to rebrand itself amid a chip shortage, why the change in image and how it could impact the larger industry. We chat with the CEO later this hour. First and foremost, we've got to get into the stock slump today. Around the world, warnings, of course, from health officials of a resurgence of COVID-19, plus an escalation in tensions between the U.S. and China had investors destabilized. Kriti Gupta, you got the market movements.
Absolutely, Caroline. It was a really big confluence, a market's jambalaya of what I call a risk factor kind of stew is really what you're seeing. And just take a look at this. S&P 500 down 1.6% today. And you really saw tech just a little bit more insulated than some of those other sectors. Take a look at this. The NASDAQ 100 down almost 1%. But if you compare it to the S&P 500, it's just not that bad, Caroline. Go even bigger in market cap to some of those big tech stocks. And you're only down 0.7%. This, of course, coming as you start to see yields down as well. A whopping 10 basis points. So, Caroline, where did all the money go? Treasuries is a given, but where else did it go? It went into the dollar. You can really see that up 0.3%. And there were little pockets of tech that actually did well. Semiconductors, which at one point were the most hit on the day, coming off some of those geopolitical headlines. It looks like it came back. People bought that dip when it comes to semis. And then, of course, the NASDAQ Biotech Index. You know, I don't have a reasoning for that, but somewhere, somehow, people are into healthcare tech stocks, I should say. I do also want to mention our big after-hours earnings story. IBM reporting second quarter earnings with a massive revenue beat. And this, of course, making it their best revenue growth since 2018, citing cloud demand. So that, of course, sending shares up after hours, Caroline.
We'll be digging into that IBM story much more in a little bit, but Kriti Gupta, thank you so much. Meanwhile, let's get straight to Van Horn, Texas. The world's richest person is set to launch into space on Tuesday. Bloomberg Technology's Emily Chang, of course, she's in the scene. How does it feel? Hot, I imagine.
Caroline, it is hot, it is windy, we see storms and clouds overhead, but apparently that's the weather in West Texas. And we just got a surprise visit from the man himself. Jeff Bezos came in to deliver dinner to the press corps. Chicken thighs, mac and cheese, and black-eyed peas. Apparently it's his mother's favorite recipe. He said he's finished up his training for the day. He's still feeling really excited. Didn't indicate any nerves, though someone did ask if this was his last meal before the flight. And he said, who's saying anything about last meal? We're not going to go there. So it seems like all systems go here from everything we've heard from the company executives, from the engineers, from the people on the ground. This rocket is taking off tomorrow if everything looks good. Behind me is where the rocket is being stored in the shed they call the barn here. And then about a mile beyond that is the launch pad. That is where the rocket will be taking off. Jeff Bezos and 3 crew members, his brother, Wally Funk, and Oliver Damon, will load into that crew capsule. It'll take off vertically, and then at some point midway into that flight, the capsule will separate from the rocket. They'll both continue into space past the Kármán line, which is the international space boundary, and all of them will experience 3 to 4 minutes of weightlessness. The booster will come back to Earth first, then the capsule will descend after it with parachutes, land hopefully safely in a cloud of dust. Of course, the big question is weather. As I mentioned, there are clouds overhead. We drove through a thunderstorm last night. Apparently that's typical of the afternoons and the evenings here. In the mornings, it's generally more clear. So launch time is set for 8 a.m. Central Time, and we're told if there are any delays, there's a few-hour window where they can delay the launch an hour, 2, maybe 3 hours. But if it gets anywhere past that, they're going to have to move it to the following day. Again, no signs of that at this point. It looks like all systems go, and we will be here live, ready to bring that launch to you.
You certainly will be. And of course, it was a little bit delayed when we watched Virgin Galactic, which you helmed as well. Talk to us about the journey of Jeff Bezos, of Blue Origin getting here, the amount of money spent. Of course, we've taken a lot of time to talk about the race in the last couple of weeks, but this has been a long time coming.
Absolutely. Caroline, he founded this company in the year 2000 before SpaceX 21 years ago. This has been a long time, a long dream in the making. Bezos has talked many times about how it was his childhood dream to get to space. He grew up watching those Apollo missions to the moon, but there have been bumps along the way. There have been delays, there have been design challenges, and now finally here we are. And what is interesting is that the vision that Jeff Bezos has for space is very different than what Richard Branson has talked about, very different from Elon Musk. He imagines being part of building the road to space that would allow entrepreneurs and other businesses to create this future space ecosystem. He doesn't want to leave Earth. He thinks Earth is the best planet, the most beautiful planet. He doesn't want to go to Mars, but he wants to have the capability to live outside of Earth in order to protect Earth. The way he describes it is he says, we're going to run out of energy, we're going to run out of resources here. We need to get to space, move industry to space, for example, so that it can be powered by solar energy. We can use water from the moon and turn that into rocket fuel to keep our missions going around and around. So that is very much his vision. Richard Branson, of course, is focused more on space tourism. Elon Musk has talked a lot about getting to Mars, colonizing Mars. So that is where Jeff Bezos imagines Blue Origin fits into the piece of the pie. But it'll be interesting to see whether or not his journey up and down changes him or that vision in any way.
Quite the different philosophies. Emily, amazing. Stay well out there. We'll be having so much more from you throughout the show from Van Horn, Texas. Of course, that's Emily Chang. Now, let's talk about some of the other corporate news that was out there today. Robinhood hopes to raise up to $2.3 billion in an IPO. Now, the trading app at the center of this year's meme stock frenzy says it will sell more than 55 million shares. Robinhood expects the IPO to price between $38 and $42 at the top of the range. The company would have a market value, therefore, of $35 billion. Crystal C here to join us now. And it's so ironic that it's a company that has sort of dined out on the story of meme stocks. And you say one of the key risks it sees is becoming one itself.
Yeah, like they were banking on, to the moon. And this is, again, like meme stock seems to, like the name suggests that it seems to be a short-lived phenomenon, but it seems to have gone on for more than a year now. And that during that 1 year, it really had brought a lot of new audience, a lot of users, a lot of attention, and a lot of volume, trading volume to Robinhood. So the meme stock really had benefited them. And what they're warning now is themselves, because of the retail participation, it could have a lot of volatility in a stock and essentially becoming a meme stock. So we will see on the 29th, they will list on NASDAQ. So whether volatility will be an issue, we will know by next week.
Give us a sense check, of course. You're the woman who covers all IPOs, whether this is a good timing. I mean, yes, we've had a volatile day in trading, but we're still near record highs, right?
That's true. Taking everything into context, this is a very, very good year for IPO. Just in terms of volume, in the 7 months, there are over 200 billion raised through IPOs and SPACs. So volume-wise, it's doing very well. And majority of the IPO are still up. Last week was a little bit of a bumpy week, and today was not the best. But they aren't pricing until next week, so the valuation won't be set until then. And from then on, it's really just the beginning. As they trade, the valuation could change. So 35 is, I would say it could be a floor price even.
Remind us who's making money out of this by going public.
So Robinhood itself is raising the proceeds, its primary proceeds, but existing investors could also benefit from the valuation boost that they may get from the first day trading and public market. So there will be a lockup. It is an IPO, it's not a direct listing, even though they are doing a very public investor day like a direct listing would. So all the lockup still applies, but the company will be raising money and existing investor can cash out at a later time.
CEOs as well, I'm sure. Remind us of just how much retail shares are being offered to those who use the trading app.
Yeah, so 20% to 35% of the IPO is set aside for users of Robinhood, which are usually the retail guys that have been behind the meme stock frenzy. It's actually an unusually high amount. Most IPO reserve less than 10%, 8 to 10% for retail investors. It is a very unconventional way. the banker will tell you that the long-term investors, the long-only, the sovereign wealth fund, they are there to save for the long term, therefore they're the better investors for an IPO and for a public company. But they're taking a very different approach. So this is an interesting experiment, and see if it works out for them, it could work out for other companies.
Talking of other companies, there was another company that was seemingly filing to go public with its S1. The CEO of Rent the Runway actually was on Bloomberg Technology previously talking about the idea of going public. Let's just take a listen.
I read the report yesterday in Bloomberg, which was fun. You know, I feel really appreciative that we're at a point where we're talking about our business being up 100% from that COVID low and our daily subscription numbers being back to or ahead of where they were in 2019. We are just building a long-term sustainable company, and we're going to continue to make the best decisions for that long-term of Rent the Runway. So nothing is off limits.
So seemingly back on June the 3rd, Jennifer Hyman of Rent the Runway wasn't disclosing whether indeed they were going to go public, but Crystal, it seems they are. And a good time to be coming? What do you expect for this particular IPO?
Well, I'm first of all very glad that our reporting was right and they are indeed going public. And today they announced that they confidentially filed to go public in the US. And it could be a few months until they actually go public, and there's right now no indication of how much they're going to raise or what the valuation is. But this is another one that is banking on the reopening.
Yes.
So as we, go out again, as we go back to work, maybe there will be more interest in getting nicer outfits.
Certainly is in my household. Crystal C, thank you so much. All over the initial public offering and SPAC market for us. Meanwhile, coming up, we'll take you back live to Van Horn, Texas, as we continue to count down to Blue Origin's suborbital spaceflight. But before we head to break, Zoom shares slipped after agreeing to buy call center provider Five9 for $14.7 billion in stock. The acquisition will expand offerings from Zoom's popular video conference app. That's as workers begin to head back into the office and students go back to school. Five9 makes cloud-based software that uses AI to help companies answer questions from customers and interact with them regardless of language, location, or device. It's all about the telephone, folks. This is Bloomberg.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang, live in Van Horn, Texas, where Jeff Bezos will be taking off in a rocket tomorrow, about 14 hours from now. He and his 3 fellow crew members, including his brother, taking off from the launch pad behind me. And right now, it looks like all systems go. I sat down with a Blue Origin Senior Director of Design, the person who focused on the design of the New Shepard rocket that will be ferrying Jeff Bezos and his crew to space, to ask him about his confidence level. Take a listen to Senior Director Gary Lai.
I'm feeling great. I'm feeling very confident we're going to have a safe launch tomorrow, and I'm feeling very proud to be a member of the Blue Origin team.
You're in charge of the design of the rocket. Tell me what your level of confidence is that tomorrow will go 100% as planned.
We have high confidence, and it's not just because we've flown it successfully 15 consecutive times, which is a rarity for a brand new vehicle to fly it successfully 100% of the time. We have done so much test and analysis on the ground. I mean, the public sees the flight test, and we describe that as like the tip of the iceberg. They're seeing what's floating above the water, but below the water, we have done hundreds and hundreds of tests on components, on the engine, in simulation, and it gives us very high confidence that it's going to be successful tomorrow.
So, hours now leading up to launch, where are you on your safety checklist?
Pretty much safety is a checklist in terms of what we need to do before launch is done. Right now they're doing the final preparations of the vehicle. We have cleared all flight constraints. So we're going to be rolling out tomorrow and just executing the procedure by the book.
Now, the big question, of course, is weather, and many space launches don't happen exactly on time. Yesterday, we were told that weather looked good, especially in the launch window, but thunderstorms have been moving in. We drove through a lightning storm last night to get to you. What is the weather looking like now?
The weather forecast is looking good right now, but that could change. So we continue to monitor the weather. If the forecast does change and become unfavorable, there is a risk of delay.
And what's the backup window if that delay happens?
We just go day for day.
Okay. Now, given that you were so involved in the design, Talk to us about the design itself. What is it that makes you believe this is the absolute best and most safest vehicle for Jeff Bezos and your first human flight?
So the foundation of the New Shepard system's safety is fault tolerance. And that is the idea that if something goes wrong, anything that you need for safety, that there is a backup system for that. And in most cases, there is a backup to the backup system. It's called two-fault tolerance, meaning we can suffer, in most cases, any random combination of two failures or human errors and still get people down to the ground safely. So I can give you a few examples.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
The most prominent one is the crew escape system. So if there is something wrong, it's detected on the booster during ascent. At any moment, in a fraction of a second, we can ignite a solid rocket motor that will send the capsule and the crew away to safety. That's one example. Another example is there are 3 parachutes on board. They have always worked. We've never had a failure, but in case, if only one of the 3 parachutes opens, we can still land safely. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. Every mechanism, every battery, every computer, every wire even on the vehicle has a backup.
Gary Lai there from Blue Origin. And as he was speaking there was actually lightning in the distance behind us. But again, that is normal for a West Texas afternoon. I want to bring in Sean Casey, Managing Director of the Silicon Valley Space Center, who has been in this business for a really long time. Sean, thank you so much for joining us. Look, you heard the level of confidence there from Blue Origin. Would you echo that? How confident are you that Blue Origin and Jeff Bezos will pull this off tomorrow?
Well, Emily, I've actually been down to Van Horn. Previously, on one of the earlier flights, our Silicon Valley Space Center flew a payload through the NASA Flight Opportunities Program. My firsthand experience is that the team that Jeff has put together is extremely professional. But another element of this is the confidence in the FAA. The FAA issued a certificate for human spaceflight that was issued just about 7 days ago. And I think what we haven't been talking about is the fact that these flights, both Virgin and Blue, are both been certified and are part of the FAA certification process. So this is a new process that's been literally developed over the last 15 years. And what Virgin flew and then what Blue is flying tomorrow are all part of that certification process. It's a big milestone for Blue and a big milestone for the FAA. Blue is going to fly their first commercial payload, paying commercial customers. And this is a great milestone for Blue, and I would also say for the rest of the industry.
Right, and of course what's interesting is that you don't have to rely on government craft to get to space anymore. You can go through these private companies, but you do need to get that FAA certification if you want to fly. Now, Sean, one thing Gary told me is that the thing that keeps him up at night, the things that worry him are the unknown unknowns. They have walked through every possible scenario that they can imagine. But what about those they can't imagine? What are the unknown unknowns? What are the risks here?
I think that's the $64,000 question, although inflated to $20. The unknowns are just actually putting the whole system together and flying it. The thing about the vehicle that Blue is flying tomorrow is that it's actually had 2 successful untended flights just with regular normal operations. So that this is actually the 3rd flight of the New Shepard 4 vehicle. So they've retired a lot of the unknowns that get you when you pull the whole system together. So I think, from Blue's perspective and from, an outside observer's perspective, they've probably retired a lot of risk. But by flying these vehicles time and time again, we do uncover surprises. New Shepard 3 was actually flown 7 separate times as part of just regular payload experiments for the NASA Flight Opportunities, for academic programs. And so the Blue Origin team has a lot of experience under their belt. They've done repeat flights with a single vehicle. And I think we're probably going to see success, the same level of success with New Shepard 4 that we've seen with New Shepard 3 in the past.
Now, Blue Origin will compete directly with Virgin Galactic on the space tourism front, but they're also working on an orbital rocket, New Glenn, and with that, they compete with SpaceX. How do you see Blue positioned with respect to SpaceX, given that SpaceX has won a lot of the more lucrative government contracts, the lunar lander contracts? And if Jeff Bezos pulls this off tomorrow, will that change the perception that NASA has of the company?
You know, I think NASA has a fairly good relationship with Blue Origin. As I mentioned, through the Flight Opportunities Program, Jeff and the Blue Origin team is clearly focused on operations in low Earth orbit. As a student of Princeton, he's part of the O'Neill community, which is talking about large habitats in low Earth orbit. We have a number of companies. Axiom is one of them that I'm thinking about. That is coming online with a lot of NASA experience that's thinking about the next generation of space stations in low Earth orbit. Clearly, Blue has some catch up to do with regard to SpaceX. SpaceX has delivered both cargo and astronauts to the ISS. Blue should be in that position, and I believe Blue will be in that position in the years ahead, once they begin the initial flights of their New Glenn vehicle.
All right, Sean Casey of the Silicon Valley Space Center. Always great to have your perspective here, Sean. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be right back with more of Bloomberg Technology after this quick break.
Let's take a look at some other tech stories making headlines today. The White House, along with the United Kingdom and other allies, have formally blamed the Chinese government for a series of, quote, malicious cyber activities. Now, the group of nations says that Beijing's leadership has been the mastermind behind an array of cyber attacks, including the Microsoft Exchange hack earlier this year. Now, that attack exposed tens of thousands of email systems, including those of healthcare facilities, manufacturers, energy companies, and state and local governments. Chinese authorities have yet to comment on these latest allegations. Uber, meanwhile, is ramping up its grocery delivery service in the United States. The ride-hailing service is more than doubling the number of cities where delivery is available. Plus, Uber has partnered with the major grocery chain Albertsons to give customers access to more than 1,200 stores, including Safeway and Randall's. Now, coming up, we'll speak with the CEO of Global Foundries about his company's expansion plans in the face of a continuing global chip shortage. Plus, we'll get his reaction to reports that Intel may make a bid for the company. Digging on that, potential IPO plans, and of course, well, the expansion in New York. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York, in for Emily Chang. Let's get back to the markets and bring in Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta. What a day, what a sell-off.
Absolutely, a very broad sell-off, but there were some pockets of good news. And I want to start off with some M&A news coming out of Zoom Inc. Of course, Zoom Video, we know it's had just kind of this massive stock rally, of course, with the work-from-home era. Now, putting some of that cash to use, buying Five9 Inc., of course, trying to expand into the market of potentially real-time recording and reporting. This, of course, for a $15 billion acquisition. Really crucial here. Let's see, of course, you're seeing the massive reaction to be pretty traditional, for lack of a better term, in kind of a deal like this. I do also want to show you what's going on with some of those stay-at-home names, because look, Peloton, Etsy, Chewy, Poshmark, all in the green today on a day that was very, very risk-off, very accelerated selling, kind of saying that this is a little bit like that pandemic trade from last year. Look, it may just be making a comeback, Caroline, but it's not just these stocks. I want to show you what the stay-at-home basket looks like relative to some of those hotel names, which we're kind of using as a proxy for this return to normal, this return to travel. And you can start to see way on the right side of the chart a little bit of a pickup. Caroline, I wonder if this is just a temporary blip, or is this something that may last for a little bit?
Key question. Kriti Gupta, always on the money when it comes to the market moves. Meanwhile, well, let's talk about some expansion plans being announced by chipmaker Global Foundries. It's looking at expanding its production facility right here in New York, in upstate New York, in fact, as part of the push to help address the global chip shortage. Plenty of lawmakers there to help focus in on, well, the U.S.'s need for development and chip innovation. CEO of Global Foundries, Thomas Caulfield, joins us now. And quite the day. I understand you had lawmakers, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo there, Chuck Schumer as well. You're really trying to refocus your branding as well as your expansion plans. Tell us about what you're hoping to do in Malta.
Well, first, it was a really exciting day today. It was a combination of three things. First, we brought CEOs in from around the industry, the entire ecosystem, from semiconductor manufacturing companies, equipment companies, ecosystem partners for design, and so forth, to have a discussion with Senator Schumer and Secretary Raimondo about what we need to do as an industry. And that was the backdrop for us announcing our bold move to add and expand our campus here in Malta, New York.
Expanding it, you want to create, 1,000 new direct high-tech jobs. You want to be focusing on an investment model of Fab 8. Tell us about your investment model. How is it different? How does it really give returns to the United States in terms of chip manufacturing when so much of it has gone overseas?
Well, I think that's exactly the point. Maybe a little over a decade ago, U.S. manufactured 37% of the world's semiconductors. Today, it's down to 12%, even though 48% or so of the demand is generated through U.S. headquartered companies. And so that's the dynamic Washington and the U.S. wants to fix, and need to do that in partnership with companies like GF. And I think today marks the beginning of a new economic model that this industry needs to have to fund this type of expansion. Look, our supply shortage is not going away anytime soon. It will get better. But what we're going to try to do as an industry is double in the next 8 to 10 years what took 50 years to grow. And with that requires a different model, a different economic model on partnerships. That means including governments to participate in investments, customers to participate in investments, and that's the only way we're going to make this work. And the demand is there. Demand society needs semiconductors. It needs to continue to become connected, and how we educate future generations of students, and a whole host of applications that are at the core of a $91 trillion world economy.
You already have been expanding. You've been seeing investment in Singapore, Dresden, of course, and Germany. I'm interested in where your expertise lies. What makes you different from the rest of the chip makers out there?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that question, because it really goes back to where our industry was 15 years ago and where it's evolved to today. 15 years ago, semiconductors was really predominantly about a compute-centric world, to do compute processing. And then with the advent of the smartphone, the industry fundamentally shifted, where all the features that we see in smartphones, we want it everywhere and everything. We call it pervasive deployment of semiconductors, to where we are today, where today, 30% of the world is about compute-centric type of technologies and the scaling and Moore's law that feeds that. And 70% is about the ubiquitous deployment of semiconductors in almost any device. And what you've seen is this 70% is where we, GF, play a really important role in these feature-rich technologies. Adding embedded memory for security, adding RF for connectivity, and things of that nature.
Tom, I'm interested in what you said a couple of years ago now. You were interested in aiming for a public offering as soon as 2022. There's been an awful lot of reporting that, you might well be being bought by another key US player, Intel. What do you make of those reports at the moment?
Well, I'll take the second one first. Look, there's nothing there in that discussion. The market, as a company like GF becomes more and more in the news, we're playing a very important role in the industry. You can expect a lot of speculations to take place, and we just have to deal with that. I think more importantly is where we're heading as a company and as an industry. We talked about 2022. We haven't backed off of that. For us, that type of strategic move is really about when we want access to the public markets, because it'll change the trajectory of the company. So we always have that in our sights as something we want to do. But for now, our focus is to continue to grow our manufacturing footprint globally as well as in the U.S., and to continue to help solve the problem we have today. Look, every day this industry, the semiconductor industry, is in the news, not for what we do, but what happens when we don't do enough of it. That's the task at hand for companies like GF, is to go fix that first and foremost.
And of course, that's why you get companies potentially wanting to eye you. So can you say that you haven't heard a single thing from Intel in terms of wanting to buy you for $30 billion?
Look, this is all speculation. That's all I'm going to say.
It's untrue.
We have our plans to be a standalone foundry and do our part for the world.
And of course, you're standalone, backed by Mubadala. key sovereign wealth fund. Have they said anything about your trajectory in terms of going public?
Oh, this asset, I think, has become a real star in their portfolio. They were very thought leaders in understanding the role of semiconductors 10, 12 years ago when they entered this space as long-term patient investors. And I think what you're seeing is they're going to start to see this pay off, this visionary view of the semiconductor industry, the role they could play in it as a sovereign fund, and what they have accomplished, right, and what they've done for AMD, and now what they've done for Global Foundries.
So they wouldn't be interested in selling you don't think?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
They wouldn't be interested in GF being acquired?
I think they're interested in holding on to GF and make it the most successful company they've ever had in their portfolio.
And when we look at the supply chain issues that we keep on coming up against, whatever industry we look at, it's been affected in some way. You said you're trying to fast forward right now, what has taken 50 years to build over the next 5, 10 years. How soon will we stop talking about supply chain issues, do you think?
So fundamentally, I think the big gap we have over the 2022 will close that gap with supply demand. But again, the way I think about it is if we're going to do in 8 to 10 years what this industry took 50 years to do, that's a lot of capacity that has to come online. And I think by and large, we will be chasing supply for the next 5 to 10 years rather than having too much supply for demand. I think it'll get better, but we'll be chasing supply. In fact, that's why we need to make these investments now so we start to close some of that gap.
We want to thank you so much for spending some time with us. We're taking our questions, not only about your own growth trajectory, but some of the speculation, as you call it, out there. Tom Caulfield, really great to have some time, the CEO of Global Foundries. Meanwhile, let's get back to some of the earnings that we've been having. Starting thick and fast, IBM, of course, reporting its biggest increase in revenue in 3 years on the back of strong cloud computing demand. The Signal CEO, Arvind Krishna's pivot to the fast-growing market is really starting to pay off. The shares jumped in late trading. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Jackie Develos for more. We're up 3% in after hours, Jackie. This is really where Arvind's been trying to take the business. The story of hybrid cloud. It seems to be working, right?
It certainly appears that way, and it's been a long road for him. He's been pursuing this even before he became CEO last April. He's spent quite a bit of money in acquisitions thus far, about $3 billion in the first half of the year, and 14 acquisitions since he started. So he's really been pushing for this hard, and it shows that it's starting to bear fruit.
And of course, the big acquisition that we all know of was the Red Hat acquisition. That integration seems to have gone well. They've been waving goodbye to, well, a key member of that Red Hat team, the previous CEO. Was that any of a concern from the investor base, or are they really more focused on now the integration and the growth after?
I think initially it was definitely a concern in that, was the hybrid cloud strategy going to continue given Jim Whitehurst was such a chief architect of the broader strategy and its execution thus far. From what we're hearing now, it seems that, 2 years into this acquisition, this strategy is already in play, and Arvind seems to be putting other pieces, whether it's international expansion within this segment in Europe and Latin America, in play as well. So it doesn't appear to be like it's going to really sway the strategy overall going forward. So I think they're a little bit calmer on that front.
More convinced that hybrid cloud is clearly what clients want. They're paying for it. We're seeing the revenue increase. At what point do you think there was any talk of this global focus that they have, Latin America, Europe? I think of what's happening in terms of COVID abroad at the moment. Is that going to be a boon, or help, or hinder in any way the ongoing sustainability of this revenue growth?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a total boon for them. I think from what they've been seeing in client demand, even before the pandemic, it showed promising signs that this was going to be something that is sustainable. But what they've been seeing even more recently is that a lot of consumer spending has really ticked up as more economies are starting to reopen, especially in North America and Europe as well. And so I think they're really trying to capitalize on that by continuing this hybrid cloud and AI capability focus, which should play out just given the way they've been going so far.
Slight weakness in Asia just by the very nature of what's happening in the economies there, but strength, as we say, in America, Latin America, focus on Europe. What is left for him to have to prove now? If we're managing to get this revenue growth that had been promised, where's next?
I think that execution is going to be key for them. They've been talking a lot about keeping this momentum, that people or businesses coming out of the pandemic are hungry to really shift into the cloud. And I think for them, as a company, going into this full force and not really relying on the core competencies that they really grew, really grew them into the tech giant that we knew them decades ago. And so keeping that focus is going to be key, even while their global technology services unit is going to be spun out. That's expected to be finished off at the end of this year. But really keeping the focus will be key.
Jackie, really great running us through the numbers. It was a beat for IBM. We saw it rise after hours. Jackie Davalos on all things Big Blue. Meanwhile, coming up, the new health app helping businesses return to the office while protecting employee privacy. We'll hear from the CEO of San Francisco startup Proxy. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Now, as businesses start to encourage their workers to return to the office, they need to ensure employee safety while respecting medical privacy. One San Francisco startup has created an app to help workers verify their health status without actually sharing their health information. Proxy CEO Dennis Mars joins us now for today's work shifting segment. Dennis, how are you doing this? How are you making it that I can get into my office in a safe manner? They know that I've been checked, and they know that I'm not perhaps carrying COVID, but they're not actually getting access to my own data in some way.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. The way we do this is simply use the smartphone as the digital version of your vaccine certificate, where it stays locally on the phone, and all that's being shared when you do tap in to check into a building is the verification to say that, okay, this person has been verified as either vaccinated or recently tested negative or has passed a health screen. And then therefore no actual information is shared, just a verification. It's kind of like, going to the bar, and instead of sharing your driver's license to see that you're over 21, it's basically just seeing that you're over 21, and they don't need to know where your address is or anything else about you. And so that's how we essentially design and build our technologies to make sure that privacy is always preserved, it's always kept on the smartphone, and what's shared really is just a verification piece.
I have a feeling you're a pretty busy man. How much has business been scaling at this point? Was this what you'd always been destined to be making Proxy for? Was it some sort of pivot for you?
Well, this was an acceleration of what we were building. We started out really using the smartphone to replace employee badges and corporate access passes so that you can replace those plastics and use your smartphone instead, and soon to be wearables. And the whole idea is that because we're all carrying smartphones with us, can we use that as a credential? And can we do this in a private way that you're not sharing any information, you're not sharing anything with the building, so that we can maintain people's privacy, and while at the same time give people a better experience, make things a lot simpler for them. And because we're all carrying around a smartphone, the whole idea is to use that smartphone. Now, because health has become a big concern of our customers, making sure that they're reopening in a healthy environment, a lot of our customers have asked us, how do we also ensure people are healthy? And so we've introduced the Health Pass capability really as just another credential. It's your employee ID badge, but it's something that you keep locally as a verified attestment that you're vaccinated or you tested negative. The goal for a lot of our customers is really thinking about how do we reopen safely and keep everyone healthy. And so we leaned into that direction, both for ourselves and for a lot of our customers, because we were asking the same question: how do we reopen our office in San Francisco while keeping everyone safe, and we don't want anyone getting sick. So, and at the end of the day, we also don't want to be looking at anyone's health passes. So it was very important for us to use our technology in a way that can actually help businesses reopen.
What are the reticences that you're having to fight back on? What are companies asking you? Why would they be nervous to enact this in some way?
It's just adding a lot more friction in some cases. It's like more steps when everyone wants to get back to normal. The big question that always comes up and that we ask a lot of our customers is, what are you reopening to? That always leads into more questions. And, while everyone has a perception of reopening back into the old days of how things were done, really the reality is we're moving into a new world of reopening to a new healthy environment. And so people are looking for those tools and trying to understand what's the best way to do these things to keep businesses open, to not have to shut down, to make sure if someone is sick that measures can be taken to limit the exposure, or at least report it in a way so that you don't have to shut down the whole building, but you can at least inform the right people to let them know that somebody is not feeling so well. Maybe you don't want to come in the office tomorrow. But those things are now really important.
Yeah.
And the pushback is really about, can we do this in a simpler way, preserving people's privacy as well.
Yeah. Dennis Mars, great to have some time with you, the CEO of Proxy. Beautiful background he had there, of course, of a rocket, and that's exactly what we're talking next. We're going back to Van Horn, Texas, home, of course, to Blue Origin. The launch there will hold the world's richest person. The latest on the preparations of the takeoff and what to expect tomorrow. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
We don't think of it as a race at Blue Origin. We are in this for the long term. And by long term, I don't mean 5 years. I don't mean 10 years. The vision of Blue Origin is generation spanning. I will not see it happen in my lifetime, maybe not even in my children's lifetime. That is how long the horizon of Blue Origin's vision is. And I'm very excited to be part of this early step, but it will keep on going.
Blue Origin Senior Director Gary Lai there talking about the mission, the future of Blue Origin, that the changes that they hope to see might not happen in our generation, our children's generation, but perhaps our children's children will get to experience this future space ecosystem that Jeff Bezos has been talking about. Jeff Bezos, his brother Mark, Wally Funk, Oliver Damon have concluded a 2-day, 14-hour training that involved various simulations and demos. They're done for the day. They're going to get a quick refresher very early in the morning in time for that 8 a.m. takeoff Central Time. I want to bring in our Ed Ludlow, who's on the ground in Van Horn, Texas, a few miles away from here. Ed, this is a tiny Texas town that Jeff Bezos, brought this company to years ago, and this is a big moment for this place. Talk to us about the impact that Blue Origin has had on Van Horn. What have people been saying to you out there? I know there's some murals, there are signs. People are pretty excited.
Yeah, more than one person has told me that this is the most exciting thing that will happen in many of these people's lifetimes. Sincerely, they meant that. This is a community built around ranching. Historically, there was mining and irrigated farming that took place here. It's interesting because Blue Origin has been a neighbor for a long time. Bezos acquired the land in 2005. They didn't build the launch pad in 2014. And finally, after this long journey, the company is fulfilling its original mission statement, right, which is to send a paying customer into below orbit space. It's crazy it's taken this long, but for the town, they really hope it will put them on the map, though so far, in terms of direct investment, there's not that much to show for it.
Right. Now, let's talk a little bit about what we can expect tomorrow. You were on the ground with Richard Branson at the Virgin Galactic launch. These are two very different missions, very different kinds of technology. Blue Origin is going straight up and down. It's 11 minutes. It's like 2 times as long as a roller coaster ride. The Virgin Galactic experience is over an hour. As I understand it and what I've been told, Jeff Bezos and the crew will feel 3 times the weight of gravity on them. They will be pushed down into their seats as they're going up into the air, and over time, that feeling of pressure will lighten until they get to zero gravity. They'll be up in zero gravity for 3 to 4 minutes, and then they will start their descent down. How will that differ from the experience that Richard Branson and his crew had on Virgin Galactic?
Yeah, I love this part of the story because it's not a new debate in the space industry. A capsule-based technology versus a winged technology. Virgin Galactic was taken up on a dual fuselage aeroplane, the then spaceship detached, and it's basically a rocket engine attached to an airplane that goes the rest of the journey. This is classic rocketry with Blue Origin. The stack, which is the combined booster and capsule, leaves the Earth with 110,000 pounds of thrust. And as you said, extreme forces on the way up. But once they cross the Kármán line, they don't actually escape Earth's gravitational pull. So they start to come back to Earth. The flat bottom of the capsule experiences extreme heat, but distributes it evenly, slowing itself down with air resistance. And actually, on the way down, the crew will experience 5 times gravitational force, 5G. So they better make sure that they buckle up their seats when they're told to. It's an incredible experience. But as you said, it's over in just a few minutes. It's literally 3 or 4 minutes of weightlessness in space.
Right, and I understand they're going to get a 30-second warning before they have to buckle up, so hopefully that's enough time. And Blue Origin has made much of the fact that their windows are bigger. I think it's like 3.5 feet tall by 2.5 feet wide, so perhaps they'll have a better view of that spectacular rare earth view from outer space. Ed Ludlow, thank you so much. Caroline, I'm going to send it back to you from Van Horn, Texas. We're all excited now, 14 hours from launch. We will see you here bright and early in the morning.
Stay cool, stay safe in the weather, and good luck. Enjoy your night in Van Horn. Meanwhile, don't forget to make sure you tune in tomorrow for our special live coverage of Blue Origin spaceflight. It starts 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time, 5:30 a.m. on the West Coast. Get up bright and early, as Emily was just saying. It's going to be across Bloomberg TV, radio, and of course, Quick Take. But that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York, and this is Bloomberg.